Welcome to the Call to Lead, where founders and CEOs in the finance sector share what calls them to be a leader and offer wisdom for ambitious professionals. I'm Tracey, CEO of Windsor Edge, where we grow financial services and fintech businesses. Let's get into today's episode. I'm chatting with Salvatore Buscemi, managing partner and founder of Brahman Partners.
If you're a founder starting out, always be raising capital. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to call the capital or ask for it, but always out there being engaged with people and being of value. There's a lot of people who go into real estate, they don't understand that it's cyclical, they don't understand that things happen for a reason. We're seeing that right now. This downturn hasn't started or ended yet, depending on who you talk to. I started my career in college, and my junior year, I was working for this doctor, and I was very proud to have this internship as a surgeon. It was my undergrad, and I would do so much work for the surgeon that I would ride my mountain bike in the rain to Johns Hopkins just to get, at the time, microfilms and things that weren't easily put on, dating myself, on a flash drive, if you will, to bring it to a meeting at the Israel Hospital in New York. I was doing some research. And as I was in the cadaver room, I passed out holding a femur. And at that point, I said, you know what, maybe this isn't for me, but I was kind of ashamed. So I plowed through my senior year. And what happened is after I graduated, this guy who had been championing me, when he called me to congratulate me after I graduated, he said, Sal, look, I understand. Don't worry about it. My brother, I've been talking to him about you. He just made partner at Goldman Sachs. He wants to talk to you. And at that point, it became a whole different shift. I spent a lot of time there, and it was great. I also had personal tragedy. My father passed away suddenly of a heart attack. When I was 24, he was 56. And I made a promise to myself. He died kind of young of a heart attack. He was a smoker. I get that. There was a lifestyle issue then with the boomers. One of the things that I made a promise to myself was that I would start my own, I would do something entrepreneurial like you. At the time, Bear Stearns was collapsing. And at the age of 29, I had a lot of doors thrown in my face, raising capital. But at 29, somebody agreed to give me a $30 million equity facility, park asset manager, and the rest is history at that point. It was pretty, 30 million today is probably 100 million. Back then, if you look at it, going back like 25, that long. But what it did tell me is that I was able to do something on my own.
The rise of the self-made investor. How do you get that first 30 million?
You just have to knock on a lot of doors, but you can't be afraid to network, and you need to go out there and meet people, and you need to be able to work on the network to be able to do something. What people don't do, and we've all had friends like this, there would be a person that we know, a friend who lost their job and they're looking for contacts. They don't know anyone, but they're cold contacts, right? That is not the way the world works. What I was looking to do is to just find people who are interested in what I was looking to do. But before I did that, I was of value to them first. I would help them with other things. And then once you do that, you build that reciprocity. A lot of people couldn't be bothered or they're too good to help someone who might be able to help them a lot. And in this case, I did help someone who did help me a lot. And that led to a few roads and a few turnpikes to the Park Avenue investment manager that decided to take a gamble on myself. I think it's an amalgamation of just keeping your network very warm, reaching out to people and continuing to do that. I came from a good firm. I had a great track record. At 33, I had a second fund out west. And we did really well with that. That's the impetus of my first book, which was called Making the Yield, Hard Money Lending Uncovered. But what really comes down to it is just talking to those networks and continuing to be out there and be yourself. It was really fostering the relationships from there that determined the future. There's a lot of people who go into real estate, they don't understand that it's cyclical. They don't understand that things happen for a reason. We're seeing that right now. This downturn hasn't started or ended yet, depending on who you talk to. Any increase in rates has caused a problem. And I was thinking to myself, well, interest rates went down. People are outbidding me on things. And I had to give back a huge chunk of money to families and larger net worth investors who I've known growing up. Some of those guys were life science guys. And they said, Sal, why don't you just point your guns at us and work with us? I said, okay. At that point, I had another tragedy soon after my younger brother passed away. So I was just looking for a way to distract myself and go into something where I wasn't being outbid by doctors and dentists on necessity retail. These things have been trading at a 10 cap going back to Moses, and they were buying quarter cap. It made absolutely no sense. It was before the pandemic. And so we just focused that way after I did my second institutional fund. It was really an intellectual challenge for me because I had already written 2 books and I was talking to people, and I gravitated from the institutional investors who are very quantitative to the family office investors who are, if they're newer, they're not as quantitative. they're established, like Rockefeller and Company, where my partner came from. They have, CIOs, like all over the place covering each industry vertical.
Wow. Thanks for that great summary. What about today?
Right now, I co-founded a multifamily office called Brahman Partners, a nod to our Boston-based families, although it does attract a lot of East Indian questions because that's a symbol of high priesthood. And we look at it the same way. A lot of the families and a lot of the life science companies that we've invested into are based in the Boston areas. We quite remarkably have built a impressive life sciences portfolio. And then since then, we brought on some other marquee investors and got into things such as we just finished our fifth and final into SpaceX before the end of the year. In December, we did a second into Stripe, which is doing very well. Now we're moving into real estate. We like Class A real estate. Our investors, we have 13 families, all of which are over $100 million. They're already rich, Tracey. They're not looking to get rich. So they don't want to take on the headache of having tenants poorer than them in value-added Class C buildings in maybe impoverished cities in middle America. Now, that's a huge wealth creator for people who are there, but it's not for these families. So we have one deal that we did 4 years ago before the pandemic. It's doing very well. Our investors, it only came online about 3 years ago. Our investors will probably be paid off in whole before the end of the year. And it's a Class A industrial building that we really like in Las Vegas. And we did it with a Southern California family office. And it worked out very, very well. Now we're doing the same thing, working with similar families in Salt Lake City and other areas. We really focus on one thing with our family office, the interactivity in the community. And I think that's where a lot of people today, when they come out of institutional America, they seem like and I don't mean this against lawyers, but if you've ever gone to high school or grade school and then your friend goes to law school and they come out and they seem like a different person, that's what it feels like when some of these guys go to institution. They come to you, use word, they quant-splain things to you. They don't have a personality other than using words like synergy. So it's really, a lot of families don't understand that. And they just think, you're just another private wealth manager from UBS or JP Morgan.
And do you get pitched to more often, or do you do the pitching?
No, I get pitched to all the time. And right now, like we have, even on LinkedIn, I just tell them we're totally packed until the end of the year as far as our deal flow and are concerned. But there's also, there's a term I coined the other day in the office, and I call them deck pics, right? Inappropriate pictures you get on text or LinkedIn. You don't know the person. Maybe you wish you never got it. You feel awkward receiving it, but it's a deck that you got in your text message. And it usually starts with, hey, bro, and then, we're raising a series or something. And I can't take any of that seriously. So I appreciate the hustle, but when you're working with families, Tracey, you probably know this, they're more relational than transactional. And all these guys are all transactional, right? And I'm at the level in my career, it sounds very arrogant to say this, but I can get what I want. I can find the deals to get into. I don't need to go with a first-time founder who, might not have done this before. And now he's got a huge ego, and your check is really like his tuition to learn how to become, someone else.
Is there a remedy for any hope for these guys, these quant-splainers?
So I think, is there a remedy for it? I think America's a great country, and anybody who comes over here, I can guarantee you they're here because they want their assets here or they want to create wealth here.
I think you need to publish a dictionary next, really. I think that's your...
Deck pics, right? Inappropriate deck pics. All the time. All the time.
That's like a coffee table book, actually.
Somebody get pitched. Everybody's got something to show. So every time somebody wants to hit me up on LinkedIn, I use the Owler app to see if they're serious. You should check that out, OWWLL. And it's great because you can set your office hours and people pay you for your time, right? Hey, let's jam on a call for synergies. The worst word in the English language.
Synergy?
The worst word. I hate it. It's a 4-letter word to me. Every time I'm like, yep, you're right out of business school or you're trying too hard. They're like, nice meeting you, bro. I'm like, it's like Art Basel, right? Where everybody comes in from everywhere. So you get a lot of the public school kids who don't know how to act.
What are your other least favorite words?
Pro forma, that's Latin for lie. Let's see, a few others, but pro forma is Latin for lie. Like no real estate guy actually can hit his pro forma. It's just facts and figures. Models both in finance and fashion are meant to manipulate perception, right?
How does somebody stand out to you? How do you and did you learn that by pitching?
I learned this almost through destitution. When I was talking to people and I was raising capital for these companies, it would lay on deaf ears. And I'm not saying I would be destitute, but I was actually just sort of pivoting because the market, real estate had gotten too hot. Everybody who knew me knew that if I was pitching them, say, for example, in 2020, a multifamily deal, they would probably want to have me checked for needle drugs. So it went against character. What happened is I had to learn, really it came because I wrote my first book and nobody sold it for me. So I had to learn direct response copywriting. And then you go down the rabbit hole of sales, influence, and persuasion, and what makes a good deal maker and what makes a good person to present. And I can tell you, it's not much different when you're talking to someone. You got to think about it as if you're propositioning, whether it's an investor. A lot of people don't think about this for a long-term marriage. A lot of these companies, especially earlier stage, even with the pedigreed founders with many exits, we have one, Thomas Forrest Farr-Porsche. He's the CEO and founder of Thrive Bioscience. He's got 17 exits under his belt. Thrive will be his 8th unicorn. He's always looking for money. You have to understand, this is a marriage, and you're going to be going back to the well, when times are tight or if anything happens, for more money. A lot of these founders don't think of their investors as being anything more than a piggy bank or an ATM. Building the relationship first, the trust and the commonality is something that comes first. And it's really no different than courting someone for marriage. It really is. You got to be looking for the marriage, not the one-night stand. Because if you get a one-night stand and you have a small check size come in, it might make you feel good for a little bit, but you're going to be paying for it later because you just brought in an investor that you're going to be married to for at least the next 7 to 10 years.
Wow. So dating is a good way to practice pitching.
Yeah. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole and what that looks like, but there's a certain way when you're courting people to build the trust before you get to first base. It's the same thing, and nobody thinks of it that way. Everybody's all business. They're all transactional.
You've written 3 books?
I've written 3 books, one of which talks about my entire story and some of the other stories other people have brought in. I wrote that after my mom had passed away during the pandemic. I was out east in the Hamptons with some friends, was bored hanging out with them. I called my publisher and I said, we're ready to do this now. We put together a great second draft that tore up the first one. I brought in people I'd worked with throughout my career, some key opinion leaders, some Goldman Sachs partners who added to the allegory and made it much more impactful. There's a rule they said at Goldman, and that was whether you're in real estate or venture, always be raising capital. And if you're a founder starting out, always be raising capital. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to call the capital or ask for it, but always out there being engaged with people and being of value. There are guys I know who have a lot of money. They've not invested with me yet, but I'm building the trust by making introductions to things, maybe inviting them to a new hot restaurant that opened up down the street called Cloudy, which is, very big thing. I'll get these dinner passes for a free opening event. People really want to be involved in it. Whenever you're doing that, you start to build a community, but people who gravitate towards you because you're building that trust. They're like, wow, he really likes me. He's not just using me as an ATM. And since moving to Florida, people always want to interact. One of the things that I did, which is very important, was that there's a few people from New York who are very high profile who I've known for a while. And I put together a WhatsApp group for these New York and Boston family offices. I put together a tremendous community of interactivity. I call it the 305 Intelligentsia, which are basically families who have migrated from Boston and New York down to Miami. So whenever somebody comes to town from New York, we have an excuse to meet up. And that's usually on a monthly basis. And again, it's just keeping the relationship warm. That's it in a nutshell.
Amazing. One question for you.
Yeah.
Can I use your dictionary terms?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes,
fun.
absolutely. Got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Tracey, it's a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll send you.
Thank you.
I already sent you a copy of my book. Anyone who listens to this, I'll send them a free autographed copy of the book. They send me an email, sal@brahmanpartners.com.